Happy birthday to me. Hello guys, and welcome to a happy Monday here at Barham Engines. Cole, what time is it? It's 20 past 10, it's my birthday. I'm here, I was gonna have the day off, but no, dedication. But what I am gonna do is probably have the afternoon off. I'm gonna go and have some lunch with my wife and my daughter. But yeah, 20 past 10, and it's been absolutely mayhem in here as soon as I got in. So when I got in, there was a chap, Andy, who I spoke to last week, and he has dropped off 5 boxes actually here. So this is a box of spares. So we've got 2 sets of pistons, a crankshaft, a set of rods, etc. I think he wants us to pocket these pistons. This is all Cosworth stuff, by the way. Yeah, so this stuff is spare. He just wants us to go through, so obviously check and size the rods, etc. And then we have got an Escort Cosworth pile of bits. So we've got a block. Although it's going in an Escort Cosworth, it is, I think it's a Mark 1 Escort. I'm sure Andy's going to correct me on that. Mark 1 Escort, 205 block, two-wheel drive cylinder head. Same with this one here, but this is in a Focus. So this is going to be a rear-wheel drive Mark 1 Focus build. We've got a knife edge crank, set of pistons, all the rest of it. So yeah, we've gone through all that with Andy, and yeah, load of machining to be done on there. He just wants it all right, us to do what we normally do, go through it with a fine-tooth comb, size, balance everything, pocket the pistons, rebore the blocks, face the blocks, all that malarkey. So yeah, he's come right down from the Midlands by the sounds of it, so that's really good. Yeah, while we're on the subject of Cosworths, Paul was in Friday. He didn't manage to get this one finished, but all I've got to do now is go and get a bottom end gasket set. We've got the pistons all in. You can see under there, look, we've got the correct 12 thou jut out. It's all torqued up, sized up. Paul's done his usual plastic gauge it within an inch of its life. He's cleaned the sump up. So I'm just going to get a gasket set, guys, get those front seal carriers on, and get the oil pump in, sump on, a few bits, and that one is all done, thank God. What else we got? The normally aspirated one, I'm not going to start today, obviously. We have got the cylinder head here to go on to Andrew's. I've just got to double check those valves, get the springs on, etc., and then we can pop that head on. But yeah, it's been a Cosworth week or two, guys, and it looks like it's going to be another week of a few Cosworth bits. Isaac's off this week, as I know, but John is back, although he's had to pop out. Loves a little trip in the van, does John. Right then, guys, so Kevin's Cosworth here. I'm just about to put the sump on, and I thought I'd take this opportunity to show you something which seems fairly minor and sort of disinteresting, but very important. Now, the amount of people that have rang me up in the past saying that they've got oil leaks, that they think's from the rear main seal, they think's from the front crank seal. As a matter of fact, it's from the actual sump gasket, or the sump sort of gasket setup. So I just thought I would take 5 minutes just showing you exactly how I put the sump on successfully without any oil leaks. Now, fingers crossed, can't remember the last time we had an oil leak from a sump. So yeah, it's probably worth, if you sort of got a Cosworth or thinking about building a Cosworth, then it's probably worth you watching this just so you can get the thing sort of put on successfully. The reason I decided to do this is because I had another phone call this morning off a chap who's done about 1,000 miles on an engine that he's had built, and it started leaking oil from the front and the rear. And I said it's very unlikely it's going to be the crank seals, more than likely your sump. His is a 2-wheel drive. Now the difference between the 2 and the 4-wheel drive, you've got the half moons either side on both, they're the same, but on the 2-wheel drive you have a gasket, but on the 4-wheel drive, because of the diff setup on the sump, there is no gasket, so it runs a face-to-face fit, right? So on the 2-wheel drives, the only difference is with the gasket, we put a very thin layer of this stuff here, the black gasket maker. But on the four-wheel drives, because there's no gasket, we use this. And this is an anaerobic sealer. This is the green stuff that many of you have probably seen on my engine builds before. And the advantages with that stuff is it goes, when there's no oxygen, it will go off. But where there is oxygen, it will stay wet. The advantages with that, if any goes on the inside of the sump, it stays wet and just sort of goes into the oil rather than going hard and then getting sucked up by the pickup of the oil pump. So this is a four-wheel drive one. So what we do, guys, the theory is the same on the half moons. Now, first thing, imperative that you get the surfaces of the block and the sump absolutely oil free. Once you're sure that you've got both surfaces of the block and the sump oil free using brake cleaner and a clean cloth, then you can go ahead. And the second bit is you've got your front cover here. So this is the front cover that holds the crank seal, and you want to make sure, because this isn't doweled on, you want to make sure that the join against the block is flush here, especially on the four-wheel drives, because there's no gasket. You don't want it raised on one end and lower on the other. So we've gone ahead, done that. Okay. Next thing is the rear. So we have this half moon that goes in the rear. Now you see there's little tags there. These little tags that it's got on the front half moon and the rear half moon is where the gasket on the two-wheel drive would go into. You see that little notch? Well, there's like a little tag on the gasket, and that would push into that just to ensure that in the corners it's all joint up. But you use the same half moons on the four-wheel drive, obviously where you've got no gasket. So what I normally do is trim 2mm off the length of the tags, okay, so they don't bottom out into that recess there, where obviously the mains cap goes into the block. So I cut 2mm off there. I then inject a little bit of silicone in either end and run the silicone just out the edges, just so it sits underneath that tag there. Okay, so the reason I cut the 2mm off is just so that sits flush on the face of the block, okay, thus allowing the whole seal to sit flush in there and not raised. Once you've done that, if you then push this seal in, you will then, or you should see, silicone coming out of that join there. You see that? And that, you know, then just keep going, and you know that that hole is fully sealed. And then you do the same on the other side. See that? Just keep pushing, and we know, it doesn't matter how much silicone comes out because we can trim that later, but we just know that that hole, there's no oil going to be leaking out of that between the cap and the block. And you see that because I've trimmed the 2mm off, this tag here sits flush on the block, which is ideal. Then what we do, just put a little bit of silicone on there, and a little bit on there runs over the block, okay, and just wipe your fingers, and that is the back one done. You can see that now sits pretty much flush into that cap. Now the front one, guys, not the same setup as the other one. We haven't got the tag that runs off the end there. This is just literally sitting on the sump. So what I do, a little trick, is on the edge of this seal, on both sides, you've got a bit of flashing, okay, that allows it to sit sort of wider. What I do is grind or trim with a razor blade most of that flashing off. You can see that now. You see where I've trimmed it? We've probably got about 1/2 mm either side. And what that does is allow that seal to sit perfectly in there. If you leave that flashing on, this seal wants to tip one way or the other. Thus, when you put the sump on, you can't guarantee that it's going to be sitting in that tract. Perfect. So we just push it in there with both of the faces sitting on there, okay? And we do the same. A little bit of silicone just on the very edges, okay, absolutely fine. And that's a good one. You can see that now sitting in that track, guys. It's not raised. We don't want to put silicone on these rubber seals. I never put silicone on rubber. And then what we do, get that anaerobic sealer. We put a very light run, just one side of each hole, doesn't matter which side, and then what I do is just rub my finger over it until we've got a nice fine layer on top of here, and that is job done, guys. Don't bother putting anything on here, just put the sump on See, we put a little bit of sealer in the corners here where those little seals sit, just to make sure that the very edges, there's no gap there. And then that is absolutely ideal, guys. We just put the bolts in, nip it up, job's a good one. So as I say, main rule of thumb, make sure it's bone dry with some brake cleaner, and just make sure that these little half moons are trimmed, so everything sits in perfect, and you shouldn't have any oil leaks, guys, fingers crossed. Back to last week's thumbnail and title video, this engine for Kyle. So what have we found, guys? Now, like I said to you last week, I haven't really found anything wrong with the block. I'm convinced the bores are absolutely perfect. The rings look good as gold, although I'm going to just stick a new set of rings in it just as a matter of course, because it's to bits. Been through the cylinder head, stripped it all out. Can find nothing wrong with the cylinder head. Obviously we put new guides in, etc. The only thing we didn't do, because this head has been apart and worked on before, we didn't put new inlet guides in. The reason for that is they're original type and they are snug as a bug, so there's absolutely no benefit. If I just get a valve in here, look, there's no play in there whatsoever, very little, but that's how you want to run them anyway. Stem seals are all brand new. Can find nothing wrong with this, guys. But the only thing we did find when we took the valves out, the valves are very wet behind the heads, very wet indeed. There's no leak past the guides because I've tested that. But if you can see down the ports, if we can get some focus here, you can see it's very wet down those ports, guys. So what my next step was going to be to strip out the inlet manifold, which I've done. And as you can see, as we've suspected, there is oil, a mist of oil, and even a good old layer of oil by the gasket. And you see down there, guys, there is a mist of oil been getting in this thing. I am suspecting that this is going to be a breather issue. So I've sent the turbo off to Vince. Vince is going to be checking that. Obviously not going to hear about that until the next day or two. But what Kyle has been using is the standard setup, really. Now, a lot of you have said to me, why have you stripped the engine before you've checked all the breather and that? Obviously, the car was right up country. I did say to Kyle about the breather initially because the symptoms, when it's all consistent across the board, does seem like a breather issue to me. But what he's done, he's got an uprated catch tank and what have you on there, like a Bailey job. So it's partially uprated, but he is using the standard setup here. So we've got the kidney box, which is fine. No problems with that. We had that initially and we cleaned that out. That was fine. But he is using all this pipe work here. So you've got this little contraption here, which is the flame back valve or whatever they are. And then it goes from that. I've basically blew air all the way around here. And what you've got is it's that way the valve will open, but this way it should be shut. But it's sort of leaking air both ways. Obviously the valve is opening and shutting, but it's still leaking oil past there, air past there. And then you've got this pipe which goes from there and goes into the inlet manifold. And when we look at this, guys, that pipe there in particular, this vacuum pipe, is covered in oil in there, and it's also very, very oily in there. So I suspect that this thing has been basically, whether it's been, like a lot of you said in the comments, whether it's been producing crankcase pressure under boost pressure, and the crankcase pressure has been blowing it back through one of these vacuum pipes there into the inlet manifold. It's either that or the turbo, very unlikely the turbo. Apparently this thing was done by Vince about 2,000 miles ago, so I've never had any issues at all. So I am suspecting it's this, guys. What one of his friends has said, who's well in the Cosworth scene, he said he just runs from the kidney box here, which obviously comes out the crankcase breather. That's a return down into the sump. Just runs it directly from there up into his separator pot at the top, and do away with all this. Just blank off so you can't push anything into that inlet manifold. But it is looking more and more like that to me, guys. As I say, I cannot find anything wrong with the engine whatsoever, but I'm just going to put a set of rings in it as a matter of course. Obviously, we've stripped out the head, we'll clean that up. I might just throw some new stem seals in there, although they're brand new. But yeah, normally, you know, when you do enough of one particular engine, you know just by the symptoms, you know, when it's across the board like that, the first thing we always go for is the breather system. You know, it's surprising. You don't need much and it can just force oil into there. And that, to me, looks exactly what's been happening. So, yeah, we'll get this all cleaned up, guys. Wait till those rings arrive from Mar Motorsport and get this thing back together and on its way back to Kyle, and he'll just have to do away with all that original breather stuff, really. But so today, guys, as I say, I just want to get that one finished. I was hoping Paul could get that done, but he didn't manage to get it done on Friday. I just want to get it done out the way. It's only the bottom end. We can get that one out. It's out back to Kevin. And we've got an available spot here. Obviously, this one's going to be done. Kyle's this week. Obviously, the head, this one, hopefully, I'm going to get done this week. And then we can start cracking on with the normally aspirated. But, yeah, as I say, I'm only going to be here half a day today, guys. Got a few bits and bobs going on. Sorry, it's not my usual sort of going through some technical stuff with you. I haven't got much time here today, but I hope you've had a great weekend, guys. I'm going to go and enjoy the rest of my birthday with me wife and me child, and I will see you again on Monday. Thank you very much, guys, for watching, and we'll see you then. Take care.